Lastly, we have Bring It Together. Math teacher Dan Meyer essentially combines the Make It Real technique with the Simplify technique, bringing them together and to the next level. It's very interesting to hear what he has to say about making math more relevant and fun, and it might be worth the time to take a look at some of these links that I've posted here on TED Talks, YouTube, and his own blog. He works from the textbook and reworks questions that he likes, applying several principles for teachers, which, you will notice, overlap with much of what we have just discussed. So his principles for teachers are, number one, use multimedia, especially video. Number two, encourage student intuition by using real-life examples that level the playing field, because all students can relate to them. Three, ask the shortest question possible. He either eliminates the question altogether and simply shows a compelling situation that begs the question, or he asks only the final question. In either case, he lets students develop the sub-questions or sub-steps. 4, let students build the problem. He believes in developing students' problem-building skills rather than just their problem-solving skills. And 5, be less helpful. So in other words, guide student learning, but let them take the responsibility. So that brings us to the end of our webinar. So thank you everyone for attending today. We hope we've given you some new ideas or refreshed some old ones and you're feeling positive about returning to the classroom. Before we take questions, I just want to take a moment to give 2 quick plugs. The first is for MathWorks 12. It will be available in June of 2012, June of this year. It will include the same range of resources as with the previous versions of MathWorks 10 and 11, and evaluation copies of the resource are available now. If you are interested in receiving one, you can contact Phil at the address that you see there, pep.sales@ubc.ca. And the second plug, as promised, is for our next webinar. We hope you will join us next week on February 7th at 3:30 for Hands-on Learning in MathWorks, when we will look at how teachers can support student participation and success through whole class, small group, and partner discussions, activities, and projects using MathWorks. A reminder, too, that you will be emailed a feedback form following the webinar. It will only take a couple of minutes, but the feedback's invaluable since it will let us know how we can best support our teachers and plan for future presentations. Now, we're on to questions. So if you haven't already done so, please feel free to type in a question, or if you prefer, you can click the button to digitally raise your hand if you have a question. Okay. Okay, so we have a question here that Katrina, the editor, will be asking.
So there was a question about the workbook and whether it covers the curriculum, the WNCP curriculum. So the workbook does cover all specific outcomes of the curriculum. It matches the student resources in content, and the questions sort of cover the material in a more simplified way. So each of the specific outcomes is covered in that workbook.
And I can answer a question about the timing of next week's webinar. It's 3:30 local time, so we're running it, the same webinar 3 times as we are doing with this one. So it'll be 1:30 Pacific time, 2:30 Pacific time, and 3:30 Pacific time. So obviously, if you're in Saskatchewan or Manitoba, you should tune into the first one.
Okay. So we'll just, if there are any other questions, or if anyone would like to raise their hand, you can do so now. We've been doing a lot of talking and sharing on our end of things. If you would also like to share any of your experiences, any things that you've tried in the classroom with the students to support students with lower literacy levels, you're welcome to do so as well.
We've got a question about how do we register for the next webinar next week. I sent out an email about that at the end of last week. I'll send out another email about that towards the end of this week. And there are links there for the 3 different timings of the webinar, and it's a case of just clicking on the right one at the right time.
Okay, and there's a question about the length of the average assignment from the textbook versus the length of one in the workbook. I'm not sure if that's about the number of questions per topic. In that case, so the student resource will have about 10 build your skills questions at the end of each section, and then about 10 practice your new skills questions at the end of each chapter. The workbook does it a little bit differently. It breaks it up into following each worked example. There are around 3 or 4 build your skills questions per sort of topic covered in a worked example. So each section of the workbook will have quite a few more build your skills questions than the textbook. In terms of exact numbers, I'm not entirely sure, but yeah, more.
More practice in the workbook. And additionally, there's a question, are there drawbacks to using just the workbook as the main resource? If you're talking about as the main resource for the questions and the individual practice, as mentioned, there's more and they are a little simpler, so there may not be that much of a drawback there, but overall you would miss out on a lot of the activities and discussion opportunities and other interactive offerings that the text brings, and again that we will discuss further next week at the second webinar.
We've got a question as well by someone saying they teach workplace maths online, and they're asking if we have any plans to develop online manipulatives to support this. At this stage, yeah, sorry, at this stage we don't have any plans to do that, but we'll certainly look into it if there is a demand for that from teachers out there. So it's good that you've raised that. Thank you. And there's a couple of other questions a bit further down there about potential errors in one of the texts. We'll look at them specifically and get back to you. And if there are any errors that we find, we'll do our best to correct them in any reprints that we make. And well, perhaps one of the final questions we can take, are there PDF formats of the materials? The answer to that is yes. The student resource comes in a PDF on a CD, as does the workbook as well, so they're both available.
I think there's one more question we could address just quickly. It says, from a publishing perspective, would you suggest that from a literacy standpoint it's more beneficial to use a combination of the resources? I would answer that yes, I think it is more beneficial because, as highlighted in the presentation, that there are some strengths to all of the different resources. The text can be used as your source of activities and discussions, and lots of ideas for hands-on and interactive learning, and that's supported as well by the teacher resource. And the workbook can be used as primarily individual practice, opportunities for students to do some independent work and make sure that their understanding is solidified. And then adding into that, of course, would be some of the additional resources in the teacher resource. And if you'd like to use the test bank as well, it's a pretty fabulous tool for creating practice questions as well as actual assessments for the students. Okay, so unfortunately we're out of time for any of you with unanswered questions. We will follow up on email, and if you do have another question, you can use the email address that was given previously, which is pep.sales@ubc.ca. So thanks so much again for attending. Please take a moment to complete those feedback forms when you receive them, and we'll see you at the next webinar.